Here's the video for EOC practice tests 1 through 10. On this first problem, we have comparison between Jesse's bus ride to school and Robert's bus ride to school. It tells us Jesse's bus ride was 5 minutes more than 2/3 the time of Robert's bus ride. So our equation is y equals 2/3 x plus 5. As you can see, our slope is 2/3 and our y-intercept is 5. So we could already eliminate answer D and A, because neither one of them have a y-intercept of 5. As you can see here, B has a y-intercept of 5, and so does C. Since our slope is 2/3, all we have to do is translate that. 2/3 means 2 up and 3 to the right. So we start from our y-intercept, and we're going to move 2 up, 1, 2, and 3 to the right. And we land on the line at B. And we do a second one, 2 up, 3 to the right, we land on the line. If we look at C, we go 2 up and 3 to the right. We're not on the line. Therefore, our answer is B. For number 2, you have to pick the scenario that's modeled by this graph. If you look at the graph, it is a solid line. First is an inequality because you know it is shaded. It is shaded underneath. Therefore, you know it is a less than problem. Since the line is a solid line, that means that these two taken together mean that it must be a less than or equal to scenario. So we look at the scenarios. A says number of pounds of apples minus y minus 2 times the number of pounds of oranges, x is at most 5. B says the number of pounds of apples, y, minus half the number of pounds of oranges, x, is at most 5. C says the number of pounds of apples, y, plus 2 times the number of pounds of oranges, x, is at most 5. And D, the number of pounds of apples, y, plus half the number of pounds of oranges, x, is at most 5. Okay. If we look at each y value and get to the line and drop down, we can see where our x value is at. When y is 1, at most, our x value is going to be 2. Okay. When y is 2, at most, it's going to be a little bit above 2. And when y is 3, it is at most going to be 1. And as you can see, our slope is negative, and our y-intercept is 5. All of them said at most 5. So the y-intercept isn't going to be much help here. It's a slope. Okay? Now remember, slope needs to be with the x and by itself on the right hand side. Y is going to be by itself on the left hand side. Okay? So if we look at each of these, So when we translate each of these statements, we get y, the first statement translates into y minus 2x is less than or equal to 5. B says y minus 1/2 x is less than or equal to 5. C says y plus 2x is less than or equal to 5. And D says y plus 1/2 x is less than or equal to 5. If you notice, the slope is negative, so when we get y by itself, that means the number with x, our slope must be negative. That automatically eliminates a and b, because when we move the x and its coefficient, the slope, to the other side, negative 2x is going to become positive 2x. Negative 1/2 x is going to become a positive 1/2 x. We want a negative. So we look here again. We start at our dot, and we're going to go over 1 and down. You see the next point is here. Another point for our line is right here. So our slope is a negative 2, because it's 1 across and 2 down. So the answer is C. Number 3 is a trinomial. Now, there's a special type of trinomial called the difference of two squares, where the middle term becomes 0. So if you would like, you can rewrite this as t squared plus 0t minus 36. Some of you would rather write it out like this, so that you will remember that the sums have to add up to be 0. As you can see, the very last sign is negative. That means the two signs are going to be different. If you notice, the first term is t squared. The only thing that can give us t squared is t times t. As we already said, one term is going to be positive, the other one's going to be negative because of that minus sign at the end. Since it's 0t, that means we need a positive and a negative number, such as negative 5 and positive 5, because they're the only numbers with different signs that add up to be 0. But we want it to multiply to give us 36. The only number in the world that can multiply itself and give us 36 is 6. So one answer is going to be t plus 6, and the other answer is going to be t minus 6. So the answer is B. Okay, number 4, we have a quadratic. Now you need to remember, a quadratic has similar properties as a linear function, okay? You have coefficients to your variables. 4 is a coefficient of x squared, negative 8 is a coefficient of x, and plus 7 is by itself. That 7 is very similar to a plus 7 found in a linear equation. It is your y-intercept. If you look at the graphs, the only one with a y-intercept of 7 is D. Now, if there was another graph with a y-intercept of 7, then you will look at your coefficients for x squared. 4 is positive, okay? So it will make a u. Also 4, because the coefficient is 4, is going to make a slightly thinner or skinnier curve than a coefficient of 1 or 2. Remember, the higher the coefficient, the skinnier it becomes. If the coefficient of x squared is a negative, such as a negative 4x squared, then you know it's going to make an n. You can either use your graphing calculator, or if it's on the non-graphing calculator part, you will use your quadratic formula. And hopefully everyone has this memorized, because your quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, the whole thing over 2a. And you can use that to find the solutions to your equation. Remember, if you get an answer that does not make sense, such as the square root of a negative number, you know that there is no solution. So if you will recall, a is going to equal your x squared coefficient, which is 4. B is going to equal your coefficient of x, in this case negative 8. And C is going to equal 7. And when you plug that into your quadratic equation, you're going to get the square root of a negative number, which is impossible to have. Therefore, is no solution. Number 5 is about a rectangle cage. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a rectangle. And they tell you that the original one, that the floor has a length 4 feet greater than its width of W. So I'm going to call my length W plus 4, because it's 4 feet greater than my width, which I'm just going to call W. Okay? They tell you that James will increase both dimensions of the floor by 2 feet. So they want you to add 2 feet to both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and add 2 to both sides of the equation. Then they tell you they want you to find the new area. Okay? Well, area equals length times width, or base times height. I'm going to use base times height here because the L looks like a 1 and I do not want to get anyone confused. Okay? So, we're going to simplify the length. The length is W plus 4 plus 2. Well, 4 plus 2 is 6. So we're going to have area equal W plus 6 times W plus 2. Now we're going to multiply this. So I'm going to rewrite it 1 on top and 1 on the bottom, and go ahead and multiply it in that manner. Okay, so 2 times 6 is 12, and 2 times W is 2W. So I have 2W plus 12. Then I'm going to have a placeholder, and I'm going to start at underneath the 2W. 6 times W is 6W. And I'm going to make it a plus 6W since it's positive. And in front, W times W is W squared. So I am then going to add or combine like terms. So w squared is by itself. 2w plus 6w is 8w. Again, 12 is by itself also. So my answer is w squared plus 8w plus 12. So my correct answer is D. Number 6 begins the short answer part of the non-calculator part of the EOC. Here we have two boys who went for a walk. You have to be careful at this point where it says Sean began walking 20 seconds earlier than Curtis. Okay? So his time is 20 seconds earlier than Curtis. Okay? They tell you Sean walked at a speed of 5 feet per second and Curtis walked at a speed of 6 feet per second. Now remember, Sean had a head start, okay? He started 20 seconds earlier than Curtis, okay? So Curtis has to make up some lost time, okay? So since Curtis walks 6 feet per second, he has to make up 6 times 20, which is 120 feet. Now we got to get x, all the x's together. So we're going to have 5x. 6x is positive, so we're going to make it minus 6x equals a negative 120. 5x minus 6x is a negative x equals a negative 120. That means x equals 120. Number 7, you have two unknowns. You have candy bars and drinks. You know the number of candy bars and drinks you sold and how much you sold all that total for, but you don't know the cost of each candy bar and drink. So in this problem, I'm going to let y equal my candy bars and x is going to equal my drinks. Since I have two unknowns, that should be your clue that you have a system here. So I have 60y plus 110x equal 265. For the 60 candy bars and 110 drinks will sell for $265. Then I have 120y plus 90x equal 270. Again, for the second part of our information where it says 120 candy bars and 90 drinks will sell for $270. Now you have to make a choice here. If you notice, you can actually simplify everything down by 5 since everything ends with a 0 and a 5 if you want to, so that you will be working with smaller numbers. Or if you look again, you notice that 60 is 1/2 of 120. So we could do the elimination method where instead of dividing everything, we're just going to multiply the top by a negative two. So that we wind up with a negative 120y minus 220x equal a negative 530. The second equation is going to stay the same. Now that we've done that, we can see that we can cancel out our y's. That leaves us with negative 130x equals a negative 260. So that means to solve for x, we're just going to divide. So x equals 2. So that means our drinks are $2 each. Now to solve for y, all we got to do is simply take one of our two equations and plug in x to find y. I'm going to use the second equation just because x is a smaller coefficient, but you can use either one. Both will give you the exact same answer. So I have 120y plus 90 times 2, because I'm replacing x with my answer, equals 270. So I get 120y plus 180 equals 270. I subtract 180 from both sides. So I get 120y equals 90. To find y, all I have to do is divide. So I have 90 divided by 120, which equals 3/4. Now since we're talking money, y equals 0.75 or 75 cents. Now remember, there are other ways you could solve this. You could have gotten y by itself in one of the two equations and did the substitution method. Either way will work. And of course, if this is on the calculator part, you will just solve both systems for y and then plug it into your calculator and find out where they cross at. Okay, they want you to find 3 consecutive positive integers. So my first one is going to be x, because I don't know where it is yet. Since it's consecutive, that means my second number has to be x plus 1. Again, consecutive means right behind each other. So 1, 2, 3, or 10, 11, 12. 21, 22, 23. So my third number has to be x plus 2. Now they tell you that the product of the two smaller ones is 5 less than 5 times the larger integer. Okay, so the product of the smaller two. So I have x times x plus 1 is 5 less than. That means the minus 5 has to come behind the next part. Less than, remember, just reverse the order. So it's 5 times the larger, so 5 times the larger integer, which is x plus 2, minus 5. So now all we have to do is simplify. So we have x squared plus x equals 5x plus 10 minus 5. Now we're going to simplify. I can already tell that this is probably going to be a quadratic or a square root problem. So I want to bring everything over to the left. So I have x squared plus x. Now that means the 5x is going to become negative. The 10 is going to become, well, I'm going to go ahead and simplify 10 minus 5, which is 5. And bring that over to the other side, making it negative. Now I'm going to combine like terms. And the only terms that I can combine are the x minus 5x. So I wind up having x squared minus 4x minus 5 equals 0. Now again, I could either do the quadratic formula, or I could see if there is a way to break this down into two numbers that multiply to give me negative 5 but add up to be a negative 4. And just from the top of my head, I know that there is a pair of numbers that can multiply to give me negative 5 and add up to negative 4. So I break down the x squared, x times x. Now again, my last sign is negative, so I know one's negative and one is positive. The only numbers in the world that can multiply to give me 5 is 5 and 1. Since the 4 is negative, I'm going to make the 5 negative and the 1 positive. And don't forget to write down equal 0. Now we're not done yet because we need to solve this. So we're going to do x minus 5 equals 0, or x plus 1 equals 0. Now some of you, when we were solving quadratics, forgot this step, so be very careful. Remember, set each part equal to 0, then solve. X equals, the 5 is going to go over and become positive, or x equals negative 1. Now we go back to our question. Our question clearly states what's the smallest of the positive integers. Well, the only one up there that's positive of our answers is 5. So that's the one we're going to use. We're not going to use the 1 because the 1's negative and we want the positive answer. So our answer is x equals 5. Number 9, they give you a function and they want to know how many seconds does it take the object to hit the ground. Well, if it hits the ground, it is no longer moving. So we're going to take our equation that they give us and set it equal to 0. So we got 5t squared plus 20t plus 60, and we're going to set it equal to 0. Now again, you can try to find two numbers that multiply to 60 but when added together gives us 20. But if you look, our signs here are positive and another positive. Well, there is no number off the top of our heads that multiplied 60 but add up to be 20 off the top of our heads. So instead of doing all that, I'm just going to go ahead and do the quadratic formula, which is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, the whole thing over 2a. And don't forget your minus sign under your plus. Okay? So again, looking at my coefficients, a equals a negative 5, b equals 20, and c equals 60. Now, if you want to, because these are some pretty large numbers to be using here, if you notice, you can also go ahead and factor out a 5 to make the equation even smaller. If you want to do that first, because I know some of you don't like really big numbers. So if you factor out a 5 from this equation first, your new equation will be negative t squared plus 4t plus 12 equals 0 if you factor out the 5 first. So that will give you a much smaller number to use for your coefficients. So a can become negative 1, b can become 4, and c can become 12. So that you will be working with much smaller numbers. So negative b becomes negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared minus 4 times a negative 1 times 12, and the whole thing will be over 2 times a, so that'll be 2 times a negative 1. Let me draw my square root symbol. Okay, I'm going to bring it up here so I have room. So, negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared is 16. Now, 4 times a negative 1 times a negative 12, 4 times negative 1 is a negative 4 times 12 is a negative 48. So I got 16 minus 48. If you want to, again, some of you like to keep that negative with the 4, so you want to turn the problem into negative 4 times a negative 1 times 12 will give you a positive 48. So you will write 16 plus 48. And 2 times a negative 1 is a negative 2. So again, that will give you negative 4. And if I simplify what's in underneath the brackets, I have 16 plus 48. All of that over a negative 2. And I'm going to go ahead and simplify all of that. So I have negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 plus 48 is 64, all over a negative 2. And the square root of 64 is 8. So this is why I'm going to separate the two problems out. I have negative 4 plus 8 over a negative 2. Or I can have negative 4 minus 8 over a negative 2. Negative 4 plus 8 is a positive 4 divided by negative 2 is a negative 2. Or negative 4 minus 8 is a negative 12 divided by negative 2 is 6. Now remember, time is positive, so we must use the positive answer. So the answer for number 9 is 6. So time is positive, so x equals 6. You cannot use the negative number for time in this type of problem. Number 10 is another systems problem. So we have Antonio, Sarah are the two people in our problem. It tells us, well, I'm going to go ahead and set this up. Antonio is going to be my x, and Sarah, who's my other unknown, is going to be my y. They tell you in this first sentence that 2 times Antonio's age plus 3 times Sarah's age is equal to 34. So I'm going to type that up in the same color I underlined it. So 2 times x plus 3 times y equals 34. They also tell us in the second sentence that Sarah's age is also 5 times Antonio's age. So that tells us Sarah, which is y, is equal to 5 times x. So again, this is a systems problem, but since they told us what y is, the easiest way to do this is wherever we see y in our first equation, we plug in 5x. So we have 2x plus 3 times 5x equals 34. 2x plus, well, 3 times 5x is 15x equals 34. That gives us 17x equals 34. X is, you're going to find by dividing 34 divided by 17, so x equals 2. So Antonio is 2. Sarah is 5 times Antonio's age. So I'm going to do 5 times 2, which equals 10. So the answer for number 10 is 10.